Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Hey, guys. Today, I want to talk about something that came up this week. I was chatting with a friend, and I think this is, some of our conversation today, at least the beginning part here, I think is really geared towards kind of sweaty players, right? So the in game players. Because I actually had a friend who said something to the effect of, like, I like anything that's like off meta. I like anything that's not the meta. And I realized that if one of my friends could misunderstand, could maybe not understand where I was coming from and why I was doing some of the things that I was doing, then probably a lot of other people are going to be in that same situation. And so, yeah, that's what I want to talk about today and just kind of set the record straight and explain some things, not because I think they're important to understand. And I want people to understand where I'm coming from and what I'm trying to do, largely because I want to get you guys to help me. If I'm being totally honest, I want to recruit some people onto my side in a lot of ways. Hey, what's up, Ishi? How's it going, man? Hey, Chicken, how you doing? Good to see you both. Sorry, Chicken got in his comment before the chat bot was up. Yeah, so that's what I want to talk about. So I was actually on my Templar tank and I was playing around with explosive charge. Just happened to be the case, which was one of the situations. And if you if you take a look, actually, let me pull it up. If you look at some of my videos, well, let me see if I can find it. Where's it at? Somewhere in here. There we go. If you look at some of my videos, you will see some interesting things. Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit larger. What's the hotkey on Windows? There we go. Yeah, so I've got like a Warden bleed build here. This is, almost a year old. We've got the solo one bar Arcanist. Hey, Lyriel, how's it going? We've got Stanblade's only about a year old. Brittleton, I've long done the Brittleton builds where you actually ran a Master's Ice Staff on your front bar, and so you double barred Ice Staffs and trying to make it work. Excuse me. I've also done, just a lot of these builds. Here you go. A Templar heavy attack build. I got a couple of them. One of them's one bar, one of them's two bar, and it just gives you, you don't have to have Oaken Soul, and it does a little bit more damage, and it's easier to farm. Hey, Nirvani, what's going on? So, I've got quite a few of builds like that. This happens to be in the DPS, and if you go and look at, if you look at my healing builds, some of these are, so a Necro healer from way back in the day. There should be more here. I don't know why. Arcanist healer, which it's been really sad to see the Arcanist healer video not get much love. I guess there's not many Arcanist healers. People seem to think that it's not a very good class, and I tend to. I strongly disagree. I think it's a great class, and one of my first videos was actually no. My very first video was on my Necro, and it was explaining how good Bloodlord's Embrace. Yeah, that's right. The chess piece that provides you you bash someone to apply a proc to them, and then whenever they hit you, you generate Magicka. So that was like the very first video I did, and it wasn't popular at the time. I think people have kind of came over to it being a better set, like actually pretty useful in certain situations. Ishi says Arc Healer is great. I just rarely see it used either, mainly in Sanity's Edge. Yeah. So what is the deal? Am I just contrarian? What's the? These are valid and honest questions. Well, I mean, to some extent, right? I do like highly value thinking for yourself and figuring things out on your own. And so yeah, maybe there's a part of me that's just contrarian, right? All the fish are swimming that way. I want to swim the other way. Maybe that's just part of who I am. I think that's fair to say. I think if I look back on my life, I can be like, yeah, there's some truth to that. But the real reason and the very thought out and long-term goal of doing all of this, and the whole reason I really started the channel and the guild to begin with, I started the guild before the channel, is, well, there's a couple reasons for the guild, but one of them was trying to find groups to run with that weren't elitist jerks, and I couldn't find any. So, and I knew they were out there, but I just couldn't find any. And I found some cool people that would run in guilds and groups and discords that I didn't like, and so I was like, well, I'm just gonna do my own thing. But the other core reason is have wanted to get more people into Endgame. And if you watch a lot of my live streams, if you watch some of my, like when I cover independent games or get to do some interviews with people and stuff like that, I just like games. Games have always been a core part of my life, and they've added a lot of value to it. Not just entertainment, I mean, certainly that, but also been, like many of you I'm sure can relate to, an escape when life sucks, right? You come home, work has sucked. Maybe you got other stuff going on, and you can just like escape into a fantasy world. And when you watch my independent indie game kind of videos, right? Like I'm all about games just being fun. I just want them to be fun. I don't want them to be grindy. I don't want them to be pay to win. It's just the core thing is like, is it enjoyable? Is it fun? And wanting to get more people into Endgame and to show them that, like, hey, it is just about having fun. Well, for most people, when we've talked about things like race, and I know this might sound like I'm meandering, all of this all goes together, guys. If it feels that way, and tell me if it does. I can draw the lines more clearly to relate these things. But when we talk about race, a lot of people are like, "Hey, what race should I play for this or that?" And then they ask me, and I'm sure I get asked this a lot, but I'm sure you guys have also been asked this. You tell them what the meta is, and you tell them it's Nord, and they're like, "Oh," and their whole demeanor sinks, and they're like, "This one must play a Nord," right? Like clearly they want to play Khajiit, or clearly they want to play an Argonian. The races with tails are very popular, whatever it happens to be. Maybe they really like Wood Elves. My wife loves Wood Elves. All of her characters were Wood Elves, and she's like, I just like the way they look. They're cute. They're elves. I like them. Like she's my wife is very much a tree hugger, and so she wants to play Wood Elves. So I think all of her characters at one point, maybe they still are all Wood Elves. No matter what she's doing, that's what matters to most people, is the RP of it. And for a lot of people who came from other Elder Scrolls games, one of the best parts of the Elder Scrolls games was like you could just kind of make, you leveled up skills, and that made your character. And then it's been a long thing, and then all of a sudden Elder Scrolls Online came out, and now you have to play the class, and it's what a lot of people didn't like. And my thought process has long been, and I find myself fighting against this all the time, is that you have people see someone doing a score push run, and they're doing a 20-minute trifecta or sub 20-minute trifecta or whatever it is, and they're running through, and then people are like, well, I need to do that. And that's like watching I don't know what to even compare this to be like properly extreme, right? That's like watching Formula One, and then getting in your like Honda Accord and trying to drive like you're a Formula One race car driver. Now, if you are a Formula One race car driver, you're probably going to be able to drive the hell out of that Honda Accord, but it's still not going to perform the same. Also, most of us are not Formula One race car drivers, and so what we're actually going to end up doing is wrapping our Honda Accord around a tree. Okay, it's not going to be a good experience. And what I have long wanted to do is, again, just get more people into Endgame. That's what the guild does. It's so hard for people. So there's a pain point in ESO of people that are very casual trying to get into veteran trials, right? Like you just log in, you play the game whenever you can, you have fun, whatever. You go from normal overland activities to veteran trials, and it's not a step up. It's a cliff, okay? And so whenever you make that step, and it's become easier and easier over time, thank goodness, but it's a huge barrier. And so what I have tried to do is try to widen that gap. And what happens is that, if you get 1,000 people into Endgame, newer people to try veteran, and I'm saying Endgame, but like veteran dungeons, and like DLC dungeons and veteran trials a little bit more, particularly because you can with veteran dungeons you can kind of have a small group and do whatever you want. Let me catch up on the comments here. Ishi says, me when I was told I had to be a Breton to be competitive as a healer. Okay. I wanted to be a high elf so bad for cosmetic reasons. Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is I hear this from really sweaty players. I mean, you put up runs and people, they're like, "Hey, what do I need to bring? What do you want me to bring?" And I'm like, "Dude, bring whatever you want." And they're like, "Oh, so I can bring?" And they'll ask like jokingly, and I'm like, "No, go ahead, bring your Templar tank, bring your Nightblade tank, bring your uh, your Bobo Dragon Knight, whatever you want to bring. Like, bring it. Your Dragon Knight healer." Bring it, and people are like, "Oh, they think it's awesome, right?" With sweaty in-game players who adhere to the meta. Let me again keep catching up with these chats. Nirvani says, "Yeah, I'm mainly a PvP player, and I can tell you race doesn't really matter that much. For example, one of my characters are a freaking wood elf, gank blade, and are two-shotting people." Okay. Ishi says, "Yeah, it only matters in score pushing. Outside of it, it makes little difference." Yeah, and I would say that like historically, so it used to be that the minimum, so, about the minimum to do a lot of vet trials used to be about 60K was like technically the minimum. And I have been known for letting people into trials that like the group like barely meets the minimum, and like, kind of making kind of bait trials because I want to let as many people in to get them, because I'm just like, hey, if we run the trial, they'll come, and they'll get better over time. And so like 60K, but like kind of it was pretty helpful to have it higher than that. And then for hard modes, it used to be like 80K would get you through just about anything. The thing is, with more DPS, it gets easier and easier. So a lot of groups, even though those are kind of the minimums, and what I was saying is like if everybody's doing 60K, then like you're going to get through, but it's going to be tricky because you're also going to have people dying and other things happening, right? So you're just kind of, it's just kind of a rough estimate, right? And so it used to be the case that like you couldn't get into a group. They would say, well, no, we don't want people at 60K because that's going to be hard. You got to at least parse 80K. And then if you're on the proper, like the meta race, you get an extra 5% damage. That might move you from 77K to 80K. And then you get in the group, right? And yeah, you do some parse cheese also to get in the group, and then you're never going to run that in an actual trial, but that's what would happen. So it used to matter a little bit more. Well, what has happened over time is now DPS has gone up so high. It's like anybody can do enough DPS to pretty much complete any trial if you're doing reasonable things. There are plenty of really, really bad builds out there, right? Like builds that are people that don't even play the game. There's a lot of people, creators that on YouTube that I don't think actually play ESO. I'm going to be totally honest with you. There's several of them. And I think we have some pretty strong data for that. They just seem to not know what they're doing. And you look at their builds on their website and you're like, what is this? But, assuming you have a decent setup, you can do a lot of different things now, which has really opened up the end game to a lot of people. Here, let me can catch up. Yeah, so true. That's cool. When I get more CP vet trials, would be fun. Yeah, Kashel, would love to have you. It's crazy. I've seen groups with 500 to 600K group DPS do fights better than 900K groups. It makes the fight harder, but if you can do the mechs properly, it's fine. Yes, yeah. So Ishi's point here, or around that point, is that if you can do high enough DPS, you can be worse at mechanics. And so groups like, I'm talking like a year or two ago, would be like, yeah, 100K DPS to do something that requires like 50K DPS, right? Because it made it easier and you can ignore mechanics and what have you. And, whatever. I don't really care about that. I'm not trying to. I understand why they would feel that way, and I understand people get frustrated with me because I had the rec so low that a lot of the groups I would run would be bait, and I still have this reputation, to be totally honest, with people around the Discord. One of my very good friends told me this the other day. Not that like, hey, you have this reputation. They told me that I run bait groups still, in a polite way, but they still told me. So yeah, so we had it used to matter more about race and everything else and about being meta. And so the thing is that a lot of people, and again, that most people, I think, really just want to play the thing they want to play. And I honestly will tell you that it's what it comes down to with ESO is bad game design. I'm not trying to bash anybody. It's just objectively, they have the motto of play the way you want, but you can't. And it's getting much better, and we're getting there. I want to give huge kudos to ESO for getting there. Raid composition now, so much more flexible than it used to be. Okay, it's really looking good for the 99.999% of players out there. You can do almost anything with your raid comp. There's only a couple of things that you really want to be, to make it where it's easy to clear, because it needs to be easy, right? And people used to miss and still probably misunderstand that like optimization is for casuals, because if you optimize, it'll make the content easier, which is what you want so you can get through it. Really sweaty groups, I could have someone come on whatever they want, whatever crazy build they want, and the group is so good and they're so good at playing the thing that they're playing, it's going to be fine. So optimization has long been for more casual players. And so what I have tried to do is, again, I want to get everybody into in-game. Well, how do you do that? Well, it's this huge gap. We know that, going from normal to veteran. And then the other thing is, like, there's this huge gap, and then there's a lot of groups saying, hey, you've got to have a 100K parse to do Sunspire. And then people are like, dude, I pugged Sunspire the other day. And sure, plenty of people pug Sunspire and get absolutely carried through, sure. But also, like, you can get through Sunspire with a lot less than 100K, right? Like, that's just true. And so people also want to come on their Nightblade DPS. They want to come on their, their Necro DPS. They want to come on their Brittleton or whatever it is. They want this, hey, I have this thematic build, okay? And they'll tell you about it. Hey, here's my Templar. So I'm like a knight character, right? So I wanted to use skills that make me glow. Like, that happens. I'm with you. I want it too. And so what I have tried to do is, in the best way possible, find builds, kind of bridge that gap between someone who's like, oh, here's a build that is like an ice build. I'll put all the ice skills on here and it'll be a garbage build. Okay. People do that. I have tried to find, like, hey, how can we make an ice build that's actually fun, but you can bring to content and not get kicked out of the group? And that's where my Brittleton comes in. That's where the Bleed Warden comes in, right? Like, here's like a kind of a vampire build, right? You want to be a vampire. It's fun. It's thematic. And so I have tried to do those kind of builds. I've also tried to say, like, a Templar tank and a Templar healer make a lot of sense to me. They feel like paladins. In D&D, one of my first characters was a paladin. So in order to try to grow the in-game community, one of the things that we need to do is we need to say, hey, you don't need to have 120K parse. You don't need to come on the exact class that we say you need to come on. You can come on something else and have a class or a setup or a race that is fun for you, but will also still get through content. Now, with Ishii says, to be fair, you have to be bait before you can improve. Yeah, 100%. One piece of advice: increase your DPS by 25 to 30K on a boss. In Lucent, it's unfair to assume players will be instantly god tier in content, right? Yeah. That's the other thing. We've talked about this a little bit, but, like, you're always getting carried at first. We all do. We all did, and it still happens, right? And that's okay. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. So wanting to get more players in game is like, well, people don't want to, these guys are elitist jerks, right? When you come to a group and it's like, no, why are you not an Arcanist? They do the most damage. Why would you not be on an Arcanist? If it's stopping you from clearing the content, sure. And in certain groups, there's like a social contract, right? I had this happen in a dungeon the other day. Somebody queued as a tank. They were fake tanking, but they also were garbage DPS. They had no taunt. They were mostly light attacking. And I like said something to them very politely, and they got pissed off at me and were like, oh yeah, who made that rule of, like, I was like, yeah, it's polite to, have a taunt. The etiquette is this, is exactly what I said. And they're like, oh, who made that rule? Right? This is someone who's, like, going into group content and doesn't care about everybody else in the group. Okay. This is an antisocial person. If you're playing an MMO and you're going into group content, ESO, there's plenty of solo only stuff. But if you're going into group content, there is somewhat of a social contract. And if you're queuing a random normal, the social contract is kind of the bare minimum. If you're going into a sweaty hard mode, the social contract is much higher. I talked about this the other day. So I was nice enough, Beyond the Pale Order invited me to join their prog group for VDSR hard mode. And I was like, sure. And I the first time I came in what I had. I run around in purple gear, guys, because it doesn't matter that much and it's not that big of a deal. Some stuff, it literally doesn't matter. I've long done that. And, I have the gold to go buy, for the most part, I have the gold to go buy mats, but I just haven't bothered to do it, right? Just don't care. Doesn't bother me. Can't be bothered. I golded out all my gear for that group. Why? Because I needed to? Because it's going to help the group clear something? No. But if you're doing really hard, difficult content where you're progging, the social contract in that kind of group is that you would bring the best you can, that you're doing the best you can. And so that's what I wanted to do. It was a respect for the other people I'm playing with. So there is those kind of social contracts, sure. But for the average group, just getting into veteran content, they just want to play the class they want to. They want to play to some degree the kind of build they want to, right? Like you might make a necro and you want like a poison and death and decay disease kind of build, and you might choose some things that are a little bit suboptimal, right? You might choose a Brittledin. So this Brittledin, this is kind of a funny story. I was invited to come fill for a TTT group, TikTok Tormentor, which is the trifecta for Hulls of Fabrication. We call it TTT. I was invited to come join for a TTT group, and I came on my like Brittledin, and it was a parse spot. And someone asked me about it in the group, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm on my Brittledin." And they're like, "We don't need brittle. Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh no, this is the class and the spec that I parse the highest on is this Brittledin." And they were like, but at first, when they asked me, like, why'd you come on the Brittledin? They were kind of pissed off. I'll be honest with you. It was asked in a kind of a hostile way. And when I explained, they were like, right? And it was because they had this preconceived notion. The Brittledin is one meta way for it is, I think, still currently meta for a Magdin. There might be something else you could squeeze out a little bit more DPS. But, there probably is now. Actually, I kind of know that, but it's still really good, and we're talking within a few K DPS. And we've talked about this before. If you have a build, right, that's a few K DPS off from other builds, people will be like, "That's a garbage build." And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, I can't tell the difference between those two builds because I have a few K changes in my DPS between parses. So it's within the degree of error for most people that aren't like incredibly sweaty. And so part of my off meta-ness is what I am trying to do is it's incredibly intentional. I am trying to show people the reason I show up to trials and other things like that on a Templar tank or whatever it happens to be. I am trying, or a Nightblade tank when everybody still thought they were garbage a year or 2 years ago. I am trying, and they still think they're garbage probably. So it kind of, maybe that's still true. I am trying to show people that, hey, they're not, and it doesn't matter. To a large degree, it just doesn't matter. The other thing is, I am trying to make builds for people to show them, like, hey, you can come to a trial and not get kicked out if people aren't toxic on this build by being a heavy attack Sork. You don't even need Oakensoul. You can squeeze out a little bit more damage, right? Or a heavy attack Templar, because some people have limitations. Some people just aren't as good. And so they need a build that's simpler and easier. And by allowing more people to come and showing them that, hey, you can come on whatever you want, it opens up those people to endgame. And what will happen with some number of those people is that they will realize, they're like, oh, this is fun. And I didn't join before because it seemed like it was toxic and elitist. And the reason they felt like it was toxic and elitist is because historically it's been toxic and elitist, okay? They had a completely accurate estimation of what it was like. And I think that's changed a lot over recent history. Chicken says, if we skip all the mechanics, then we are so much cooler. Yeah. Well, and what Ishii was pointing out earlier, you have really high DPS groups that are like failing at stuff because they can't, you ask them to do one mechanic and they just can't do it. And you have other groups that are like complete garbage DPS, but man, they'll do 65 tombs. The first time we cleared hard mode Sunspire, my wife she was healing and she was doing tombs. I don't even know, like 10 sets of tombs, in the teens sets of tombs, like per round, per like dragon being on the ground phase. It was crazy. Ishii says, it would be nice if more guilds help new casual players get their footing in more clears. You don't need 8 meta arcs to clear VMAL or VMAL or Lucent regulars. Yeah, exactly. Ishii says, like I'm planning on making just a for fun group full of Oakensoul DPS. Hey, Ishii, let me know. I'd love to join it. I've thought about doing that before. The spec is tanky, and it would help people who can't play 12 hours a day get their clears. Exactly, exactly. A lot of these score pushers, just so you know, it's their hobby, and I'm all about that, right? Like being super intense into your hobby, but they're like pseudo pros, right? Like there's no pros in ESO, nobody cares, but they're at that level to a large degree, and being at that level means that you're playing a ridiculous number of hours, or at least you've put in the hours to get good, and now you're at like a maintenance level for the most part. But it is a perishable skill. So that's what I have long tried to do. Now, again, to make these kind of builds and show people that you can come on a Templar tank, to show people you can come on a Nightblade tank, I need to play it. I need to understand what the pros and cons. I need to really know. And I think you'll see in a lot of my videos, for better or worse, right? Like my last video, I know Arcanist, probably the least well. And so I got some help from a friend. But I think that was the one thing that I found that I missed on that video is I didn't give Arcanist quite their due on healing. I don't think it really affects the video overall, but that was like the one thing I missed. Why? Because I don't know Arcanist tanks. I've been trying, but I need to play them more and figure it out. But for most of the other classes, the Nightblade, that's why I knew they had a burst heal, right? Because I played it a lot. So that's why I'm constantly bringing these off meta things to various groups. And then the other thing is I'm also doing it to show people, because it's one thing to tell them and it's one thing to make a build. But if I'm actually playing it in content, see what people will see is they'll see. So let's say I'm on a build that's not as good as another build. I can still do the content. Why? Because I have a lot of experience with the content and with that, whatever role that happens to be. Cool. I can show people that it's possible to do these things on different kinds of builds. And I can also show them when there's situations on a Templar, my Templar tank the other day, incredibly easy to perma block in hard mode Dread Cell Reef first boss, which on those Atros, whenever you're holding those Atros outside of the dome, they hit hard. It's very difficult. And I was able to perma block basically. Why? Because I can suck up and get a ton of stamina back via a Templar ability. Okay, Repentance, I believe. And so that's like a situation that I wouldn't have known, like, oh, Repentance, like, situationally it's good. It's actually really good in a lot of situations, and I only know that by playing those classes in harder content and actually testing them in something that's difficult. And I think what some people are like, oh, you can do it despite it being bad. But I actually find, and having played them all, played all the various tanking classes and what have you, is that, yeah, some of them are harder. But a lot of people don't care. They just want the thematic thing. A Nightblade DPS, not as good as an Arc, right? And a much, much harder to use. Some of us just want to play our Nightblade. And what happens, again, is if you have that 1,000 people and you get them and you show them like, hey, you can show up and whatever and just play and it's about having fun, and show people that it's not a bunch of elitist jerks in game, some number of them will be like, oh, cool. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, yeah. So I can kind of see now why, like, yeah, people shouldn't necessarily require all these, setups to run VSS, right? Non-hard mode, even hard mode now, right? But I can understand why they do it. And I can also understand the fun of it. Because if you can go in and just burn things down, oh, it's kind of fun to just like run through a hard mode trial. When I have joined sweatier groups during streams and we've run hard mode content, people have asked me if it was vet. Genuinely asked me, hey, are you guys on vet? And it's like, oh no, we're on vet. We're actually doing hard mode. But the group had so much DPS and was so skilled and was doing very difficult things, but doing it so well that people who don't know can't even tell. Okay. And that is really fun. It's a fun, enjoying thing to happen. So if you get that 1,000 people in, some number of them are going to be like, oh, cool. And they will get more into it. And that's how you grow the end game. And the whole reason that I have wanted to grow the end game is because I want more trials. I want more large group content. I just love it. I will do dungeons, and when I do a dungeon, I'm like, you know what, that was actually pretty fun, right? We did the new dungeons the other day, went in blind, did one of them on hard mode, and we got like halfway through before we ran out of time on the other one. And sure, that was fun. But trials, like large group content, that's what I really, really enjoy. And so that's what I want to do. And I want to grow in game so there's more reason. Because right now, hardly anybody does veteran trials. And it's gotten a lot better in the last year, which is awesome. But those are like all of this, I just wanted to explain to people and help people to understand, especially, you guys. And I know that a lot of you guys, are the people that will think for yourself. You'll challenge me, right? Question your assumptions and your beliefs and stuff like that. And so, you know, I just want to spread this word and get more people understanding that it doesn't, a lot of the stuff that used to matter, I understood why it used to matter. It doesn't matter hardly at all anymore. And sure, yeah, at the sweatiest stuff and the most optimal stuff, yeah, it does matter and we should do something. But I had a friend just the other day, last week, they got a sub 20-minute trifecta in Kind's Aegis in under 20 minutes. And it was with like a generic roster. It was like an optimal generic roster, but it was generic. You can do that now. Now, is it more important for like less optimal groups to be, or I'm sorry, less skilled groups to be more optimal? I would say yes, but it's not a limiting factor anymore. Ishii says, let me make sure I get this. Yeah. High trial population, casual or not, is healthier for the game. It would be awesome if there was a way to grow the scene with newer raiders. Exactly. Chicken says, I share my Oaken Sork with people to help them get them into harder content. They like seeing the content, then they want to do more, then more, because they aren't afraid. Exactly. And then they go, hey, you know what? And this isn't everybody, but some group of people will be like, hey, yeah, I kind of know how to do this heavy attack Sork thing. Is there like something else I could do? Or that would be better or would be different? And then they might learn to do different kinds of builds. And that's the way we all learn. It's just that we all learn at different paces. And anyways, the TLDR here, and the main takeaway is that I hope that you guys will understand when I make a bow build, whenever I make a whatever build, there are meta builds out there, and I do some of them, right? Like I do some meta builds. The thing is, do we need more meta builds? Like maybe, I don't know, I would like to have a bunch of meta builds on, here on the channel, but I would also like, what we really need is like fun builds that are maybe 5K, maybe a few K off or like closer, because right now what we have is that there's a lot of people that want fun builds, and they go out and they follow garbage build guides, right? Because they're the only person that has that fun play style where like, oh, this is an ice build, or this is a bleed build, or this is a death, like a necrotic build or whatever, disease build or whatever. And we need more of those so that people can see good ones and not garbage ones. and I, again, the reason that we as an in-game community don't like those builds, for anybody who maybe doesn't feel like you're on the inside of that, is because it makes players have a worse time playing the game. And they're told that some build is unkillable, God mode, infinite sustain. And you watch, and the guy's like he's doing a delve. There's like creators they're doing like the oldest of old world dungeons that you could do on. You don't even need a build for it, right? It's just like, yeah, just go in and press buttons, you'll kill things. And people will find those builds, and then the creator told them that it was an awesome God mode, infinite sustain, whatever build. And then they go in harder content and they get absolutely wrecked. They just get wrecked. And they're like, this is impossible. I'm following this God mode build. Why am I getting wrecked? Oh, I went in this group content and they kicked me from the group. I'm on an unkillable build. This build is unkillable. I'm the tank. And it's like, well, it's not unkillable. It doesn't matter how many shields you stack on a tank. Like if you don't have some damage mitigation, you're going to die. And so they get kicked from the group because they can't stay alive, and they blame everybody else, right? But they don't blame the person who tricked them in the first place, because they don't know to blame that person in the first place. Ishii says, I started an Oaken Sork when I swapped to PC. Then it made me want to get better in other classes. It's a great thing, but you don't need meta to get trifectas. Did a Pug Godslayer with all Sorks. Unkillable Sork running Fungal Grotto 2 in the background. Yeah. That thing, Unkillable Sork running Fungal Grotto. I see that all the time too. It's either a delve or it's like Fungal Grotto 1 or 2 or something. And we've looked before at let me just open a new so you look. Oh, hey, be quiet. At Admiral. I don't know if he plays anymore, but Admiral Digby did a video. People Maybe I should type in ESO. Admiral Digby is like a person in history. I don't know anything about them. Let me see. So I think this is his channel. Um, yeah. So the Static Squad here. So the, Admiral Digby, like a lot of people told him, like he was one of these people that was like you can run, you can do heavy attack, you could do a static build. In this particular case, it was like a static rotation and get through all the content in the game. And it doesn't matter what you say, like you say something reasonable, like hey, you don't have to be fully optimal to do content. And people are like, oh well, you can't do a hard mode that way, or you can't do a trifecta that way, and and so Admiral Digby, I think, took it upon himself to like show people that you could do a lot of these things. Now, what happens is before he did this, like this was like his last one, I think, or one of his last ones that he did. I think they did a swashbuckler actually. What people would do here, I should just let this play while we're talking. What people would do is that they'll move the goalpost on him, right? Like, oh, you can't see this is what I'm talking about. Nice. Now all barrier PB, right? This is a joke. Yeah, nothing but a big mouth clown who knows nothing. You won't get away with that for PB. This is the kind of stuff. You can't do that in X content. And he showed that, I mean, they were wrong to begin with, but he also showed them they were wrong, and people will just move the goalpost. Oh, well, you can't do swashbuckler, or, oh, you can't, and they just constantly move the goalpost. And, there was a lot of people in a Discord that has kind of dissolved, from what I can tell at this point, doesn't do ESO anymore. And this kind of harassment I would also get, and I still do. And it's one of the reasons that my builds aren't like my site, is because there's a lot of people in game who just hate that they're these kind of people, and or used to be. They're, again, most of them have gone away, and there's also amazing and great people as well. You're wrong. It's impossible to do Zavaka with more than one person using barrier. DPS check is too hard, right? Static rotations won't cut it in VRG hard mode. It's going to fail, and you'll look stupid. Okay, a bunch of stuff like this.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
All right. He did great on these videos, by the way. So let's take a look at this. He's gonna pop up some stuff in a second. We'll see. Yeah, I'm in the way. Let me move. I thought I was gonna be. See on the left, barriers and magma. Okay, so he's gonna have a count for the total here. So this is someone who would go through and show people that, hey, you can do this. And this poor guy got so much harassment, just a ridiculous amount of harassment. And all he was trying to do was like show people that you don't have to be toxic, and you can do, barriers and heavy attacks and what static rotations and whatever, and it be totally fine and still get trifectas. And people say, oh, it's not possible. It's not possible. And it's like, here, I've done it. Okay. Now these things take a long time. These things take months and months for people to get good at, but regular groups take that same amount of time. It's not like that is the factor. Hey, what's up? What's up, King James? My favorite build to run is my off meta Necro. Parses like 50 to 60k, but a ton of fun to play. Yeah. What's up, Wampus? How's it going? Ishi says that Planesbreaker is easier than people think it is. And then Wampus says you rely more on Horn than Barrier. Yes, absolutely. If people in my groups hit Barrier, I'm going to be honest, I get viscerally viscerally upset. Okay. I have a reaction, and it's deep from the core of my being. Okay. And I'm saying all of these things, guys. I'm saying, and the reason that I hate people using barrier in my groups is because there are ways of doing these things that don't require or matter if you don't need to barrier. You just don't need to. And so in my groups, I am happy showing people how to do the mechanics and how to survive without barrier. And if you use Warhorn, it will make things easier. And so it's like, well, there's this thing we don't need, and we want to instead use the thing that we do want and need. It's the same reason why I like Arcanist healers, because I want the Arcanist healer to be dropping their Glyphic of the Tides instead of a barrier whenever they're using a pillager's profit. But that's a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about. I'm going to skip ahead. So they get Planesbreaker here, and you can see barriers and magmas 6, 17, 6, 24. And I don't know what will end up here on Zalvaka. 22. There you go. So, the whole point though is to try to open up in game and and he has more of these, I think. Let me see. Yeah, anyways, they're in here somewhere. I know he's done a Planesbreaker. Maybe there's just no thumbnail for it. Or not Planesbreaker, but Swashbuckler. I don't see it. I don't know. Anyways, but regardless, the whole point of all these things is that we can open up the end game to more players. And yes, all of these things are true. Yes, there's a social contract. Don't bring, like King James. If King James brought that 55, 60K parsing crow to a hard mode group, the hard mode group might, like Sunspire, could probably get through. Okay, the group could probably get through. But if everybody was on that same build, you probably wouldn't be able to get through. Okay, so there's a social contract of don't bring this fun build. A friend of mine, a very sweaty player, score pushes, and raid leads, and is incredibly knowledgeable about the game. Sent me. He was like, "Hey, do you want to see my funny meme build for dragging people through hard mode dungeons?" And I was like, I mean, of course I do. And he sent it to me, and it's a Templar in Kagranax with the res banner that can res people in 0.8 seconds. And he's like, you can absolutely carry people through content with this. And it's oh, that's really cool. That's fun. He's not going to bring that to a sweaty group, right? You understand, hey, this is my fun build, or this is this build, and it's not for all content. That's fine. There is this social contract. But when you see somebody, and I used to do this with folks, is you can look and you can be like, what is this person wearing? You see some proc that you haven't seen before, or you haven't seen in a long time, and you're like, what is that? What set is this person wearing? What is going on over there? And you look at their build, you can check in logs or whatever, and you're like, we used to look and we'd be like, whose build is this? And I knew somebody who would do this. I haven't really tried to do it myself, but sometimes you'll be looking through logs and you'll see stuff that is not a good idea. It's the stuff that will get you killed, but they've been told that oh, this is it does insane damage, and it's a DPS build that is built like a tank, so it does almost no damage. And it's great for running Fungal Grotto 1, but garbage for running Sunspire, Veteran Sunspire, or Veteran Dreadsail Reef or something. And, you can see that stuff and try to encourage people without being a jerk about it. That's the thing, right? And maybe it's not even a good time or a place to say anything, right? You'll see that some of my open runs, and it does upset some people, but I just want to be honest and try to treat people how I would want to be treated. But there'll be people on a run, and I'll be like, Ishii did this the other day. We were doing a veteran Dreadsail Reef, and the group couldn't clear, and it was a pug group, and we almost cleared. And it was amazing that we got as far as we do. People in chat were like, I can't believe that group got through the twins. Okay. Then we get to the last boss, and we can't do it. And so we have to kind of dissolve, half the group leaves, we refill. Ishii comes in on a healer, and Ishii can solo heal that. Okay. And basically did. And the other healer was doing their best, but they were new, they were not ready for this content or whatever. That's totally fine. What I will tell people is I let them know when they're being carried. Hey, just so you know, you're doing good. This is probably too hard for you right now. The other person in your role, whether that's DPS, whether that's healer, whether that's tank, they're carrying you. And that's okay. Like Ishii said, we all get carried. No one's insulting. I was carried through, I'm still carried sometimes, right? It's okay. But I tell people because I want them to know and understand, hey, just so you know, that this content is probably too hard for you. And if everybody came at the same skill level and the same kind of setups, we wouldn't clear and it wouldn't be a fun experience. And remember, games are about fun. And so that's why I just feel like I need to tell people so that I'm honest with them and so they understand, like, hey, don't go beat your head against the wall. You might need to change a few things. And then, of course, we always offer to help people, right? And that's all that it really takes. And that's really all that it is about. It's not about like, oh, I never want to do the things that are meta. In my, if I could get a group that was like a group of friends that were like really sweaty and and really wanted to try all that stuff, I don't know, maybe I could. I'm not very good at organizing groups. I would absolutely, do that, and we would run, sweaty stuff. And whenever I join groups, I'm usually kind of apologetic because I'm like, sorry guys, I kind of know what's sweaty and I can resolve the equation, but I don't just know. So you got to tell me, and I'm going to do the wrong thing, and I'll do my best. And that's how I run most of these sweatier groups. Whenever I'm running with them, I'm the weak link. Okay, I'm the one getting carried. Boss says, "Oh my god, I want to make that Resplar now." Boss, I told him, I was like, dude, I gotta make a build on this just for the memes. It's super fun. Chicken said, Sork Banner Storm Atro equals heel ticks. Oh, cool. Okay. I didn't know that, Chicken. King James said, 1,000% agree. My DK tank and my Arc DPS are my hard mode builds, but my daily driver is the fun tune. 1,000%. My 1-bar Arcanist, like unkillable solo, Arcanist build or whatever that I did the other day, I still love using that thing. Why? I can chat with my wife, I can watch Netflix, I can do whatever, and also do everything else I want to do solo. I can do VMA, I can go farm gear, I can solo world bosses, and solo world bosses while watching a movie, okay? So whenever I got to go farm stuff, that's what I'm coming in, So, it's just different things for, different groups or whatever, and in different situations. I think that's fine. But that is the reason that I do all these off meta builds. It's not because I'm trying to be contrarian. I mean, again, there is a little bit of that. I also am a firm believer in thinking for yourself. Ishi says, I was absolutely carried until I met this healer, and instead of being an ass to me, he calls me. Oh, I'm sorry. Instead of being an ass to me because he was a score pusher, he helped me. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't read. That was very clearly written, and I just can't read. Yeah, exactly. You meet someone, and instead of being a jerk, they're nice. I had this happen, in random normals recently. I always offer to help. When I see people, they're farming gear, and I'm like, why the hell are you farming Rattle Cage? I was in a group, and someone was farming Rattle Cage, and I was just politely like, oh, what's that used for? What build is that, And they said, hey, it's just my own build. I'm doing my own thing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. All right. That's it. And I've also had people where I'm like, oh, what are you farming? And they're like, I'm farming this for my heavy attack build. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, just FYI, and there's no super polite way to say this, here's the 2 meta setups for any heavy attack build, right? Here's the 2 sets you want to use. And this is not one of them. And maybe they take that advice. Maybe they don't, but you just try to help, but you don't be a jerk about it. Wampus says, yeah, I have a Stamplar DPS set up to quick res, and it's so fun. Yeah. So, well, guys, we got this group going on here in just a second, so I guess I should hop over. The only people I'm mean to is people wanting to make Vigor healers. Only time. Well, you can stam heal, but yeah, Vigor by itself is not going to do it. That's not going to do the trick. But you can make stam healers. I wanted to just for the memes. I think I have before. I think I have. Maybe I haven't. All right. Let's get this set up here over on Twitch. We're doing a hard mode. Sunspire. All right. And this is with Nani. By the way, Nani is back to streaming, guys. That's really cool. I'm really excited that she got her set up where she can stream. Yeah, do you guys have anything else to say about this or to tack on? I'm all ears. Are there any non-warden classes that can stam heal well? Yes, Arcanist is absolutely one of them. Yeah, Arcanist, because your cost of your abilities changes based on it. I think Arcanist is the best. You can actually do an Arcanist that is almost meta. It's super close with an Arcanist. Oh yeah, and now with scribing too. With scribing also makes it more viable. Yeah, the dynamic costs on Arc are great. All right, guys. I will. So on YouTube, I always make these separate VODs, guys. So we're gonna kick you over. Hopefully, it's set up to kick you over. Fingers crossed, it doesn't always, but you guys know where to find me. I'll end the stream and I'll be right back on the Sunspire stream. If you're not on mobile, if you're on mobile, it usually doesn't kick you over. But if you are on anything else, it should kick you over. All right, we're gonna go ahead and do that right now.